Hi everybody, this is Mr. Dodd again. The purpose of this video is to go through and discuss the chapters 8 through 10 of Life at These Speeds. This is actually the last section of part 1 of the book. So as soon as you finish up this part or these chapters of the book, then we start talking about going into taking the first quiz over the book. The book is broken up into 3 parts, and there will pretty much be a quiz at the end of each of those parts. And the main purpose of the quiz is just to make sure that you are actually progressing through the book and understanding what's going on, following our discussions in these study guides and everything. So, jumping right into it, the first question there, at the track meet, a reporter approaches Kevin, and then he tells that reporter that he's not actually Kevin, and then points him off in another direction. And the question specifically asks is, what does this action suggest about Kevin's character? Again, during this first part of the book, we are really focusing on like how are the characters actually developed and what kind of people are they, and then what kind of evidence from the book do we have that's going to support what kind of character that they actually are. So the fact that he is going to go ahead and tell this reporter that he's not actually Kevin and then point him off in another direction just shows a couple things. First of all, he doesn't want any attention, which probably still points to the idea that he's definitely not over the loss of his teammates, does not like having a connection with a lot of people, and doesn't really want anybody in his business. So having a reporter ask him a lot of questions is not something that's very comfortable. We can also sort of assume that people are going to know that Kevin was from this little town. Maybe they know something about the accident, and maybe they're going to start asking questions about it, and that's not something that he is even remotely interested in. So that's a couple of the main things that he's probably wanting to avoid there. Now compare this: the old Kevin, the one that was back in 8th grade. This is probably something that he'd be very interested in. And now, after all these experiences he's had, he's very different. Moving on to number 2. Henny's with Kevin when he tricks the reporter. Then, how might Kevin's action in the situation impact the way that Henny thinks about Kevin? And we talked earlier, if we're going to talk about characterization and how these authors are building up characters, one of the big things, one of the ways we get to know characters is the way that other characters view them. So if we're going to look at Kevin through Henny's eyes, her point of view here, she sees something like this. It's not going to make sense to her. She's not going to quite know why that is. So it's going to make her question and want to know what is it about Kevin that makes him want to avoid having anybody asking him any personal questions. It's also, if we start looking into Henny, the type of character that she seems to be sort of a humble character. And maybe this sort of thing, if Kevin is going to be this humble about how good he is at running track and doesn't want a lot of attention about it, maybe that even increases her intrigue in him. So it adds another layer sort of to their relationship. Number 3, who's the girl that Kevin gives his race number to at the state meet? And the simple answer to this is Tam Butterbit, which is Ellie's little sister. Now the more extended answer with this is, why is the author choosing to introduce this character right now? Which it hints at, if you're going to introduce a character like that, it's not just going to be a throwaway thing. You're not going to mention it once and then that's the last time it's ever mentioned in the book. If you want to start making some predictions here, if Tam Butterbit is being introduced now, what does that mean is probably going to happen later on in the book? And that's something for you to be thinking about. 4, describe Rye Bledsoe's character. This character, he's a senior from another school. He is very proper. He's very intelligent. He's a very good athlete. And in between the 1600-meter final and the 800-meter final, he comes and basically threatens Kevin and lets him know that he's not happy with him for ruining his chances at the 1600, and is basically threatening him and telling him that he could ruin his chances in the 800, and he intends to do so. However, he's interesting in that he's very proper about it. He does not come up and he's not, I mean, he is threatening him, but not in necessarily a very rough way. He does it with very nice language and everything. So he's an interesting character in that case. However, something to take into account here is this is the type of thing that maybe other runners are thinking about Kevin. The fact that here he is as a freshman and nobody had really ever heard of him before the season even started, and then all of a sudden here he comes in. Compare it to if you were a senior on a team and you had worked really hard so that your senior year, this was your year, and then all of a sudden a freshman comes in and sort of takes your spot, or now you're not the best player anymore, the best runner. How are you going to react to that? And Kevin here is going to have to deal with that because Raya is not going to be the only one that's going to have this kind of feeling going on. And that leads into number 5, where explain what happened in the state 800-meter final. Basically, Kevin, Rye and other people that he is involved with, some other teammates, they try to make him lose the race. Kevin ends up falling over, falls down, does a somersault, gets stepped on, is spiked, is bleeding all over the place, loses a shoe, still gets up, runs, continues running, and ends up winning the race. So, something to know about this with the 800-meter final, because this will be important as we continue on with the book. The 800 meter, it's 2 laps around a track. And something you have to keep in mind with this is that it is the longest, or it's the shortest race and the fastest race that participants do not have to stay in their own lanes. What that essentially means is runners can be cut off, so that if you have a really fast runner and you want to try to make sure that they don't just get away from everybody, you can actually get a slower runner in front of them and to their side, and it's going to slow them down enough where they may not even have a chance to win the race because they cannot get out and around people. It's also a dangerous race because of all the passing that goes on with that, because runners are running so close together, and that's what happens here. 6, after Kevin wins, miraculously, he gets up and runs with one shoe and still wins the race and is bleeding all over the place, requires stitches and everything. He ends up seeing somebody that he recognizes and he chases this person down, and it turns out it's this girl named Hannah Halsey. Now, who was she? She was a student a year ahead of him at school that went to his old school, Carton. And she is not treating him very nicely. And we don't exactly know why. And when he finally catches up to her and starts asking all these questions of her, she reveals that the previous year he didn't show up to any of the funerals, and anytime she tried to talk to him, he gave very deadpan answers and seemed very unfeeling. The way it looks to her is that he just doesn't care. Now we know, because we know sort of what's going on in Kevin's head, that he just doesn't remember it. He doesn't want to remember it, sort of. So to the outside world, he looks like a horrible person. So that starts making sense on how is Hannah going to treat Kevin right now, because she thinks that he's just a horrible person that doesn't want to remember any of those people and didn't make any effort to remember them. This is probably going to represent how maybe some other people in his hometown are going to treat him, which makes it even worse for Kevin because it means that he has no place. He doesn't want to have any deep connections with anybody new he meets because he still fears losing them, and yet his hometown doesn't want him around because of how he acted at the time, even though he can't remember the way that he acted. So it makes it even more difficult for Kevin. And Kevin at one point says, in response to Hannah, because Hannah says to him, when he fell, she was glad. When he fell down during the 800 meters, she was glad because it meant that he was going to lose, or she hoped he was going to lose. And Kevin's response at that point, it says, I am falling. And he sort of mumbles it as he says it. So what does he mean here? It means he's falling apart, is what he means. I mean, Kevin is barely keeping it together here. He is starting to remember his teammates, and he knows that he's had a very bad time after the loss of his teammates, and he's barely holding his life together. And the only way that he's sort of dealing with it is to run away from the problems, both figuratively and literally. So this is a big deal to him, and he's just admitting that. And it's the first time he's really admitted that to anyone, even though he sort of does it in a cryptic way here. Number 8, the contents of Ellie's letter, essentially, and why does it end so abruptly, and how do you know? This is the letter that she was writing in the van the night that she died. And the contents of it are essentially saying how happy she is with him and so glad that she decided to be a couple with him, and happy that he has gone ahead and said that he wants to go and move to Montana with her, basically saying how much she loves him. And then it ends abruptly because the crash happens. And we know this because it says that the paper looks like it's been underwater, which it would have been if it was in the river, and has a hole punched through it because of the pen that she was writing with went through the paper. If you want to take a look at this and why the author may have chose to put this in there, especially the way he crafted it, it pulls at our heartstrings putting something like this and saying these are the last thoughts that she ever had in the entire world. She was thinking of Kevin when she died. That really is supposed to get us. And if you are an author and you're writing this thing and you know that you're wanting to get a response out of your audience, doing something like that is going to get a response. Number 9. At the start of chapter 10, what request does Kevin make to Mr. Porfer Hessholm, and what is the result of this request? He asks to be moved out of Sundry Seeley, the sort of lower side of the school, into Zame Smith, the higher side of the school. He's turned down. And the reason is the important part, because Mr. P says he wouldn't have enough time for training. So here it is. And why is that important? Here it is. This is a superintendent of a school, and his number one priority should be academics of students. And it's becoming plainly obvious that Kevin is a very intelligent young man and can handle the work. But Mr. Porfer Hessholm is so selfish and wants Kevin, basically is using Kevin for the publicity and doesn't want anything to threaten that, so he's not going to let him over into the other side of the school. Just continues to develop that character of Mr. P as being sort of a very sleazy, weasel-like character. Number 10, describe the tests Dr. E is running on Kevin and what compensation is he receiving for these tests. The big thing to get out of this, the tests, they seem very bogus. The types of, painting his hands blue and having to run for a while, eating a Twinkie and then doing things, running with one shoe untied. None of it makes sense. And then you couple that with the idea that he's getting a lot of money to do this. So you start having to ask yourself the questions, how legit are these tests? And then why are they doing these tests and why is the money being given? So start making some guesses on what you think the whole purpose of that is. And final question, number 11, what's a symbol in literature and what do you think the shadows mentioned at the end of chapter 10 could symbolize? Shadows, most of the time in literature, if we're going to start talking about symbolism and you're going to start looking for those sort of literary type things going on, the sort of reading between the lines, a symbol. It's going to be an item or a thing in the story that can literally be taken as one thing, but then it also has figurative meaning or symbolic meaning. It's got a deeper meaning to it. And that's kind of what's going on here. Shadows normally, if we're going to use them as a symbol, we normally associate symbols with negative things, bad things. So let's think about it. What is something bad in Kevin's life or something that's hanging around? The memory of the crash and all the aftermath of it. And that's sort of hanging around behind him, just like a shadow. No matter where Kevin goes, his shadow is always there. No matter where he runs, all over the place, his shadow is always there following him, just like his problems. So even though he's running away from his problems here, that shadow is following him. So if you want to start looking a little more deeply into that, you can see that symbolism of the shadow linking up with the idea of the memories of his dead teammates and everything associated with that, and it's constantly following him. And essentially means that he cannot just run away from this. It's going to go wherever he goes, it's going to. Hopefully this video will help you. Just make sure that you are on the right track with your reading of the book. Again, if you have any questions or anything, please let me know. Thank you.